What if you look at life a little bit differently? You don't look at the big things that are spread out. You don't look at things that you could do. You don't look at opportunities right in front of you. That there they are. This could be wonderful. This could be fun. You go, but what if? What if this happens? What if that happens? Maybe I should just hold right where I am. Sometimes, that can be prudent in a real danger situation. But how does it hold us back from so many other things? The good doctor is here, Dr. John Braccio. Dr. John B., of course, is the podcast website where this one will be very shortly. Regional Psychological Services of East Lansing. Good morning, sir.
Well, good morning to you, Dave, and I think that's a good introduction to the what-ifing, if you will, worrying syndrome and how it really holds people, back in life. People like to control things, maybe in general, okay, but when you begin worrying a lot and you're wanting to have a desired outcome and you don't have control over it, it can be a pretty extreme factor in your life and a very, very negative one. And just because what happens, it's a pattern. It starts off with trying to control something, worrying about it, not able to control it, feeling highly anxious, often losing self-esteem and feelings of lack of control because you can't control things, and then all of a sudden you go to a new worry cycle, and this often leaves emotional wreckage in its wake, and it just goes on and on and on. And what can make it even worse, if you're worried about things like climate change, the economy, nuclear arms, war, the weather, world famine, things you really can't control at all. So it can be a very devastating thing to the person, this what-ifing. And a lot of people have this, but when it comes to an extreme, it can immobilize the person and really make them feel like a very, very ineffective person. And in fact, they are, because they're wasting their time and their energy on things that they can't control. So that can be very, very bad. And then they also, unfortunately, even another negative factor, they try to micromanage themselves and others that are around them, just all under the guise of control. So it's emotionally a very, very negative syndrome when you do have this what-ifing, worrying syndrome is what I'm calling it. Difficult life to lead for you and others around you.
Is that, and I want to focus on something you just mentioned there, because you talked about, looking at, the world around nuclear war and et cetera. We just discussed that on the show recently with Chris Wallace of Fox, who's doing the book on 75 years with the bomb. You could take over 75 years and you could just grind on that, or you could say, look, that's not in my hands. I've got a life to live here, and people do that. But now, with the headlines we see every day, Doc, is there a danger that that is going to create a ton of worry in folks' minds and just debilitate them?
Well, I think it is in many ways. Even there was someone who was going to be visiting my grandson a couple of weeks ago, and they were going to practice social distance. And the child, who's a fourth grader, was afraid to leave his house. It wasn't the mother's. It was actually the child was afraid. I talk to people on the phone and meet with people that are terrified, scared of so many things. And what I try to tell people is you really can't solve world problems. You can vote, you can make good decisions, you can try to help people. But if you're going to be in a what-ifing mentality in a world with so many news sources and so many attempts to make things overly dramatic, and then actually having so many things, like you mentioned before in your last segment about Seattle, I think there are people that believe that this is like a separate country because they can even hear this. Well, that may not be true at all, but it's kind of scary, I think, that people that can overgeneralize and say, my goodness, what if somebody comes in and takes over where I live, things like this. Mm-hmm. Or the climate. I think the climate change is probably the one that has many people worried. And then right now with the COVID. So, yes, there's so many things that you'd be worrying about if you want to. And if you're a what-ifer, where my advice always is you try to enjoy today. I go by my dad's view. You start with God. You start with then you come to yourself. Then you go to wife, spouse, friend, close people around you, once you start going beyond those who you really can't impact. Like we can't impact the governor except by voting, and we can protest. We can do whatever we want. But as a whole, there are certain things you just can't do. What the president's doing, the United Nations is doing. So we really do have to not be what-ifing about things we can't control. We just have to try to lead as peaceful a life as we can. I also recommend to people that they take like 10, 15 minutes a day and use that as their worrying time if they really have to worry, and try to,
and kind of fence it off there, right? Give it a fenced-off area.
Try to give it a fenced-off area. And, Dave, we've talked over the years. There's a lot of what-ifing, but when we start get what-ifing on big things that we can't control, then we really start having a hard time. And I really do believe that we are running into a lot of obsessive-compulsive thoughts now, behaviors, worries, isolation. There are a lot of things going on with COVID, with terms of the George Floyd situation, with the uncertainty in the world, with an election coming up where all of a sudden, if you came from Mars and looked down, you'd think the two worst groups of people in the world were wanting to run a country. You'd say, who'd want either one of them? That's what happens in elections. And so we're in one of those periods where no one's going to find much good in the other terms of political parties. So we've got that on top of it. So this is a real stew of anxiety-producing situations. And if you're a what-ifer by nature, or you've developed into that, this is clearly a time to start setting priorities about what you're going to worry about and what you're not going to worry about. And this is why I always like the serenity prayer. That God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And boy, there's some wise words in there that we really need to really work on. And so many people just have trouble. And the best of people, these are often, what-ifers are often the best human beings that you can have, because they really do worry and want things to be better.
Well, and they care, sure. They care. And I guess to show there's some nuance here, and let's not forget some of that gray area. The gray area would be, look, it doesn't say you can't try to change the world, but you change the world by doing your part and not accepting more than your fair share of the burden. And am I reading you right that way? So
you're absolutely right. We do what we can. We do within the realm of what we can do.
Yeah, and if climate change is your thing, you do your part to use less energy, to recycle better, to find a way to green the planet. But if it isn't greening up enough, you don't say, I've failed. I've massively, collectively, you could look at it that way, but collectively, you don't have control over us collectively. So accept that. You're saying there has to be a level of acceptance of what you can do and what you can't do. And with that, you'll be able to move forward. And, it's like taking a cleansing breath a little bit, right?
That I think is true, Dave. And we have two other elements. One addition to what you're saying there, and you can't be thinking we're all going to die tomorrow, so what's the point of moving forward? Because you can't live a life that way.
No,
and things don't move that quickly. And another aspect of the what-ifing to an extreme, they often want to micromanage other people. They want to control other people, not because they're bad people, but because of uncertainty and worry. They often carry their worrying and want to bring other people into them about don't do this, are you worried about this? It can often create patterns of the same behavior in friends and people they love and care for and children. So it's really, this what-ifing syndrome carried to an extreme is really an incredible anxiety producer for the person, and often it can also impact other people. But you clearly want nuance. I think you made a good distinction there. What can you control? And if it's something really important to you, then as much as you can, as a minimum, you can vote. And second, you can go and do a career. You can protest. You can do a lot of things. You can donate. You can do a lot of things to something that if you feel you can't control, you can't control it, that you do try to do your share in terms of helping out.
And you're, even if you're, if you're a religious person and you look for lessons, there are lessons in the Christian Bible that are that illustrate people trying hard, falling short, doing their best, and finding a certain grace in that, and they're in the Bible. They're there for the taking. Some of us need more, I guess, affirmation that way. We need more backing up, Doc, than others. You could tell one person one time and they're like, "Oh, that makes sense. I'm good." Others need a constant reminder, if you know what I mean.
Well, I think you're mentioning spirituality is a big thing for many, many people because it can give them more meaning and purpose in life as they try to go through it. It's not for everyone, but I do feel there are those that would gain by searching and looking for it more because these are trying times, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. They definitely are. But the idea that we would be not only consumed but held hostage by the headlines every day, that's a frightening thing to contemplate, and it's a sad thing to think that would take over people's lives this way. But it can, and it does, and there are ways around that, and we try to help you with the doc's expertise and many, many years in the psychological world, try to navigate these waters. And it's not always easy, but it's possible, and it's done. You can find the podcast here and hope it helps. We do. And that's at drjohnb.com, Regional Psychological Services in East Lansing. Today's issue, the what if syndrome. It's a real thing out there. Go ahead, Doc.
Let's be positive, Dave. We can change. We will change. We just have to work at it and know we can and get rid of the what ifers and let's move forward in a positive way.
I like it. We'll visit with you again next time around. Thanks for being here today. Always good to talk
a pleasure,
to you.
Dave. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. We're coming back here. Short, positive words. Control what you can control, and don't sit there worrying 24/7 about the things not under your domain. Morning Wake Up, 1320 WILS.